7 o'clock, so I'd like to convene Budget and Finance Committee, and this is also Committee of the Whole meeting. Speak up. This is a meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee and the Committee of the Whole Council. That makes it possible for other councilors to speak on the issue without violating the law. We'd like to keep this to 2 hours tonight. If we need more time, we will have another meeting. The way we're going to proceed is first the mayor and then Andy Ford and Ethan are going to give an overview of the project and the project's finances. After that, members of Budget and Finance Committee will pose questions that they have. After that, I will entertain questions from other councilors. And after that, I will entertain questions from the public. If we don't get enough time to cover everything, again, we will just schedule another meeting. So, Mayor?
City Councilors, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening about the intermodal facility garage. As you know, it was probably about 3 weeks ago or so where we had completed meetings with several of the abutters, difficult meetings, lots of concerns. At that time, we were looking at a 440 plus or minus car structure, 5 stories. Price was escalating to about $16 million, and I just pulled our team together internally and said, we have to step back and take a look at this. This is just getting too big. We don't have support from the abutters, and we also are concerned about the height and concerned about the cost. So at that point, I said, you know, we had identified that through paid parking receipts, we could afford up to an additional $5 million, and that's the change in the plan that you see. So what we did is we downsized the garage so that it's now only 3.5 stories. But again, there's a couple designs for you to look at and to make decisions about. But we're looking at the one that we're recommending to you is 240 spaces. As you know, we have honored your request that we not trade spaces in the garage. We would develop for the land, but we would purchase the land. We anticipate having, hopefully by the end of this week, a letter of intent from the legal development for their willingness to transfer the work with the city in terms of transferring the property, and included in that sale would be the demolition of either partial or full demolition of the now the fuel site, because they're not sure that they have to demolish the entire site. We don't have information on it yet, but that won't impact our process as we go forward. So where we are now is, as I said, we're looking at 240 structure, 3.5 stories. This brings down the height, brings down the cost, brings it into a situation where our paid parking revenues can support this facility, as well as leaving enough funding in the account for additional improvements downtown, which is why we initially set up the paid parking program. I want to talk about the timeline. As we mentioned several times, first of all, I apologize if there was any confusion over the fact that in receiving the comprehensive packages that address all of your issues, if there was any thought that you were expecting a vote at council meeting tomorrow night. Absolutely not. We have until the end of March, where we have to have a letter of intent, and we need to have the $630,000 approved for 100% garage design. That's our benchmark right now. If we lose the $2 million, we're at risk of losing the $5 million to the state, and essentially at that point the project is dead. I'm encouraged by the overall community support for the garage. I think this is the most support that we've had ever for this project, again, with our primary goal of being able to take cars off the central waterfront to allow the area to begin design of additional parkland. And so that's where we are. We also, as you know, need additional parking inventory for downtown and the economic development of our city. questions for me, I'd like to turn it over to our planning director, Newburyport.
Thank you. So the council received the full package, and I understand the general public hasn't received all that information yet. We did post it on the website, so it's my intention to provide a brief overview, very brief, over some of the materials we received, council members, and then to the general public to give you a little bit of context of what the council members have received. This information is on the city's website, and I'll put on the last chair, once I'm finished, a little stack here. This is a handout if you want to take it with you. It's a printout directly on the city's website page with the information that's posted, so you can go right to the URL, which is at the bottom of the page there, and you can see all these documents that we're referring to. The slides that we have are a brief overview of those materials, so that we can answer questions that the council members may have. So just a brief context, this is picking up where we last left off. Some of the project objectives we're trying to achieve here are use of the federal and state funds. As the mayor mentioned, we have $2 million in federal funding in line for this year and $5 million from the state. We obviously want to take advantage of that, which means having a shovel-ready project this year. Reduction of waterfront parking, that's really the primary objective here, is to reduce the surface area of parking in the downtown. And the central waterfront, there's no shortage of studies as to why we should reduce the parking there and make it a larger park. Increase the available parking downtown, obviously providing the garage, in addition to reducing parking on the central waterfront, will also allow some additional spaces in the downtown, which is beneficial to all the businesses that are the core of our downtown. Then the intermodal transit and parking facility, as we call it, has a bus terminal where there are 2 bus stops out on the street, not in the building, but that folks can pick up their tickets and ride the MBRT bus routes. So those are the primary objectives with this project. In your packet, it starts off with a letter of commitment from the Redevelopment Authority, MRA, which I think coincidentally is having a meeting tonight. But it is their commitment to reduce parking on the central waterfront in coordination with the city. And so this letter is just documentation of their intent to do so, consistent with the recent waterfront committee that was established by the council. And so that's just documentation of their intent to reduce at least 100 spaces off of the waterfront. This map right here was done back in 2010. This was a study that was referenced in our package to the council. We did not provide a copy of the entire document. It's about 160 pages or so. But this study was done by the Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority, was provided to the city at that time back in 2010. And as a result of studying these sites in the downtown, the NRA lots, the Waterfront West area, which New England Development owns, the Titcomb Street site here, and the Green Street lot, as well as a couple of other sites, including Liberty Street, Prince Place, and then there's actually reference to the MBTA site and actually shuttling people over. All those sites were considered back in 2010, and that resulted in the end with the council's consideration of the options in a vote to designate the Titcomb Street site. So that is why we're looking at the Titcomb Street site. And the design funds that have been spent in conjunction with MBRTA over the last couple of years have been focused on the Titcomb Street site, making sure that we have a good sense of how to best site a garage there and what the best option is. So on that Titcomb Street site, which is Green Street right here, that's Merrimack Street. Titcomb Street site includes both sides of the street. We spent a good amount of time examining both sides of the street, and it was determined, and I won't go at length over this, but it was determined that the west side, which is this side here, it's north is actually the bottom, the Merrimack goes down the bottom here. That is the most desirable site for us to place it based on cost, based on land acquisition issues, historic structures, soil issues, and things like that. So there are a number of different reasons why this site here was chosen within that larger site. At the time, back prior to 2010, there was consideration of a much larger garage happening possibly on the bridge of the street. But the project that magnitude would obviously cost a lot more, and we could not get that much of a subsidy, if you will, from the federal government for a facility that size. So it is only half of that original site, and this side is the one that makes the most sense. So that is why and I did cover that previously to the council in our prior presentation, so I'll go at length over that. But this is just an aerial photograph that I labeled with approximate building footprint based on what the designers have provided to us. So that's mainly for the council to see the footprint, but also the general public to understand what the footprint of that garage will be on the site. What you'll see here is the reddish or orangish lines are the property boundaries, and it actually includes the property boundaries of adjacent properties. So the intent is to acquire this purple boundary right here as part of the larger land owned by New England Development, which is this L-shaped piece. to acquire that area, which is essentially a parking lot right now. This aerial photograph shows the structure that used to exist here. This Napa house, that's been demolished, so this is actually vacant. So the only portion of this building here, which we refer to as the fitness factory, has fuel and a Vanguard Key Club gym in it right now. That portion of the building would have to be demolished. New England Development has asked for a little bit of time to examine the possibility of doing selective demolition, which means that they would only demolish part of that structure, possibly keeping the rest of it because it is a pretty sizable building and they could potentially keep their tenants in there for a longer period of time without demolishing the whole structure. But as of right now, we're assuming it's either a full demolition or a partial demolition of this piece to place the building footprint in here. And you'll notice from this, it's originally we had sort of a rectangular layout. That's the most efficient layout for a garage. We've cut a notch into the building here, which allows us to avoid doing any additional takings outside of the land owned by New England Development. So that's why you see this little jog in the facade. And that purple line again is the area we would acquire. I did just briefly overlay the same information here, a slightly different orientation in a three-dimensional rendering. So what you can see here is this is the fitness factory building, the large monolithic block brick building, the parking lot area where the garage would go, the front portion of the building, which we're deciding at this time whether or not that would be a partial demolition or full, but that's where the garage would go. This building has been demolished, obviously. So that's just a bit of context for you. So in the council's packet, there are 6 different scenarios that we provided. These are options that show, and you'll see here on the site layout, this is the same orientation. That's the garage footprint right there, with a little notch to the side. So this orientation right here and this size facility provides us, and I'm not sure if you can all read that distance, so I'll just summarize it, a 204 space garage. This axiometric drawing is essentially a three-dimensional rendering of how that garage, they call it a helix design, where the vehicles go circulate up to the top and then back down again. So this gives you an illustration of what that would look like. So here what you're seeing is on that ground level off of Merrimack Street, an entrance that would come in there and you could park. A similar entrance off of Titcomb Street here, folks could come in, drive up to the top, and then come back down again. And that's essentially a 3-level garage. That is 204 spaces. The second option in the packet, and I'm only going over 3 of the 6 that are in the packet. We're happy to explain more about the other options, but I think as you'll see, the first 2 are the ones that make the most economic sense, and for a number of design reasons as well. This option here, the second one, which is referred to in the package as scheme or option 1A, is 244 spaces. So what it does is it takes the prior design and adds another half a level right here. So this design here is essentially an as-of-right construction, so it's the maximum height permitted as of right under zoning. That's 38 feet out of the 40-foot maximum. Provides 244 spaces, and you'll see in a moment a little bit more about the numbers, what it costs to construct that, and what the options are. So that's basically the difference between those scenarios. Last option I'm showing here is an example. We did look at the possibility of going underground. A lot of folks have said, hey, wouldn't it be great to go underground, save some of the above ground, shrink the structure. And we looked at that option. What you'll see in the package, the explanation is essentially that building those spaces underground is almost double what it costs to build a space above ground, because the walls around the base of the garage have to become not just foundation walls to support the garage above it, they actually have to become retaining walls to hold back the earth. You also have to have sophisticated ventilation systems, because you can't have cars running, even temporarily underground without having ventilation systems to make the air clear. So effectively, those spaces are not cost-effective to build. So that's the reason why we're not recommending this option. We're also not recommending the other options that the council sees in its packet, which are ones that go horizontally across this additional land owned by New England Development. The reason for that is it's less efficient construction to have an L-shaped piece or a finger come out of the garage there. That would go towards the round square, which presents some other design considerations. But it's less efficient. You get less spaces out of that because it's narrow. There are 4 columns and supports that make it go in there per space that's being built, so it's less cost effective. And so for that reason, we're not recommending that. What you'll see is a comparison between those options. And this is a summary of the 6 options that we've shown in the packet. I have only shown these first 3. But in the 204, 244, and 227 space option, this one being the one that provides underground parking but does not create that upper level or half a level. This is the relative cost per space. So you see we get some efficiency if we lower the cost per space. When we go underground, we end up being closer to $65,000 per space, which isn't as cost effective. So that's the reason why we're trying to keep it more towards the $28,000 per space that's more typical. What you'll see in that scenario is it goes up to it's a 3.5. We're going to have the 4, but it's really a 3.5 story garage. The parking revenue bond, which you'll hear a little bit more about from Ethan in a second about from our finances, is essentially the maximum we feel that we can support from the downtown parking program revenues is a $5 million bond. So this design here allows us to stay below that cap so that all the financing for the garage, beyond what we're getting from the federal government and the state government, is supportable entirely by the downtown parking program revenues. And you'll see how we plan to provide that additional bonding support through some adjustments in the parking rates themselves. And so Ethan Manning will speak to that, as will John Berg, our parking clerk, our parking consultant, who worked with us on the Unified Downtown Parking Program about 5 years ago when we started off. And that program has been pretty successful. So again, looking at those different options, what you'll see here is that's the number of spaces that we get, the cost per space, and the relative building heights that are resulting from that. As you can see, we don't, for instance, recommend Scheme 2B, which would result in $8,000, a little more than $8 million worth of construction beyond the $5 million we think we can support with the downtown parking program revenues. So that's the reason why we recommended this
Beyond?
Scheme 1A.
Not beyond. Beyond is 5, the number's 8, so it's 3 million.
Right, but beyond, correct, right, but beyond what we think we can support in the $5 million, correct. So this slide you've seen previously, I know council members have seen, I think some of the general public that's here tonight has also seen. These are illustrations of a garage that has design elements we'd like to pull into our own garage. We have not done the final design yet. The design team is holding off until they know what size facility we want. And again, we recommended a certain scale. But this garage has some design elements like brick elements, a stairwell that has glass and brick, pedestrian level awnings or features that bring down the scale. Façade articulation, trim, detailing, and in this case it's something I think is really nice is the simulated divided light openings, so it really feels like they're window openings in the downtown buildings. So it's something that will really be compatible when people drive into the downtown. It's a somewhat, lighted area, if you will, of Merrimack Street in the sense that there isn't a whole lot there right now down the street, and you have a very open parking lot, a very large brick monolithic building. So this is actually an opportunity for us to improve that streetscape there with the garage facade. So this gives us an illustration of what we're trying to do with that. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Ethan Manning, who's our finance director, who will summarize some of the financial information, and then he'll pass it on to John Berg, our parking consultant, who will explain some of the rate structures we're proposing to fund the garage and to operate our downtown parking program moving forward.
Ethan Manning, finance director. On the website and in your packet is a much more detailed version of what you see on the screen here. But this is just kind of a summary level detail to give you an idea of how we expect to fund this $5 million bond through the paid parking program. As Andy said, that is the maximum that the mayor's administration feels comfortable bonding out of the parking program at this point in order to allow funds to be available for other downtown improvements, which is why this program was created 5 years ago. So if you see on this chart here, the green bars are your revenue, the red bars are your expenses. At the bottom, you'll see these are the basic operating expenses, followed by the debt service for the proposed garage, which for a $5 million bond works out to about $320,000 annually. And then we also assume that we'll set up a capital and maintenance fund starting in year 2 of the garage to allow funds to be available when parts inevitably break down, cement cracks, and this is based on $100 per space per month, which is the industry average that was recommended to us by John Mark. And I would just note, as you're looking at this, to the right of this dash line brings us into FY17, which is the fiscal year that starts in July. So from there, we're assuming that we're taking on garage operations. And another big assumption is that we're assuming that the hourly rate for parking goes from 50 cents to $1 per hour. And now this is just more detail on the actual parking garage revenue and expenditures. We go into a lot more detail here, and this data was compiled with the help of Todd Gilbert from Labs Parking, and it was reviewed by the city as well as John Burke. So I would like to turn it over to John to go into more of the assumptions that were used in building this one.
Good to be back in Newburyport. I was here, Andy said, a few years ago working on the initial program. I am a parking and transit consultant here in New England. And looking here really just in terms of, I was asked here to look at the market rates and what would we have for a rate structure for the parking garage in consideration of the overall parking program. And they really work together. The street and the lots and the garage are really one in the sense of how people consider where to go and what to use. So as mentioned by Ethan, the hourly rate on the street would go from 50 cents to $1. We would recommend that the off-street, in the lots, yeah, don't get me in trouble. In the parking lots would go to $1, and so that off-street rate would want to continue in the garage. $1 an hour we proposed, and there's a whole memorandum behind the several pages. You can look at some of the backup for that. The idea being that there would be a $10 daily maximum rate, so cap our keep 10 over that to pay this flat $10 rate. When we look at monthly rates, in terms of the monthly rates in the garage, usually what we do is we use the hourly rate, and you think about it, communities typically will say, well, what does a worker pay? If they paid the hourly rate, it would be 37.5 to 40 hours a week. They would pay $150 to $160 a month, right? So most communities will give a 25 to 50% discount on that to attract long-term parkers into the garage. That equates to a $75 to $80 monthly rate. So what we did is we looked at that rate in the context of what other communities are charging, $80 up in Haverhill. You know, some of the old garages in Salem and over in Lowell are still $65, but typically what you're seeing up in the coast, like Portsmouth, $135 a month, Portland, $110 a month, and so forth. This 75 comes in, you know, for a city like this, maybe a little bit low, but it's a start and where we think it should be. There are a whole host of other rates that can occur with the garage over time. And we typically recommend for a new garage to see how the trends in utilization occur and adjust rates. The key premise of marketing and pricing is that we should be looking at pricing rates every year. We shouldn't be looking at it 5 years, 6 years out. Every year doesn't mean we're going to change them every year. It means we're going to look at them every year. So in terms of that, we may want to offer a weekly discounted rate after 5 p.m. on weekdays. Right, we think the weekend use is going to be pretty good. We may want to issue 2 different types of passes, one good for 24/7, one for the workers that would be less expensive. And so those are all things that we'll get to. So we talk in the memorandum about reserved premium rates on the first floor. Ways that we can work with the businesses to get validated parking into the garage from restaurants. All possibilities. This is an economic development tool for the city. We want to consider all of it. So $75 monthly rate, we talked a little bit to staff about whether there'd be a discounted rate for residents. A 33% rate was sort of discussed, $50 monthly for residents in the garage. When it comes to the lots, of course, when you double your rates, hourly rates in the off-street lot, typically the permits double too, because you're trying to maintain your same discount, right, on the hourly rate. We look closely at a bunch of communities that have garages, some that don't, but all that offer monthly passes in their lots. So we looked at Salem and Haverhill and Plymouth and Lowell, a bunch of different communities. And that $100 a month that you're paying right now is well below what those communities are charging, below market. So bringing it, not doubling it, but bringing it to $150 here for the employee permit Still keeps that at the lower end of what you see in comparable small cities, large towns. All right. I think 4 or 5 years ago, we recommended the resident senior permits, maybe $50 a month or something like that. Here, you're offering that gigantic discount, $5 for the resident and $3 for the senior. So we're saying here, you know, if it's the council's wishes to keep that discount, we could recommend going 5 to 10 for the resident and the senior to $5. And that would really at least defray the cost of the administrative cost of issuing those permits. So I think that's really it in general. We did look at the operational cost of the garage, the entire program, the existing rates. We based it, a good amount of it on Laz's work. They obviously have garages all around New England, and we did come up with these rates.
And a question.
I think we're gonna, this is a city council meeting. We're first gonna have the councilors ask questions, then we're gonna open it up to the public.
We'll be done just a moment. So just a quick synopsis of what we've requested of the council, and again, as the mayor indicated, we're not asking for an action tonight or tomorrow night's regular council meeting. What we need for the Federal Transit Administration, and the FTA is expecting a submission of an application from us and from the Regional Transit Authority, MVRTA, by March 31st. So before that date, we need to provide what you're seeing here, which is completion of the 30% design phase. So as you saw here, we have a schematic layout of the garage. We have to discuss sort of which option the council is interested in pursuing. We've recommended one. But completion of that final 30% design phase, which has some additional information that goes with it, that's the schematic design phase. Evidence of site control, and we've been in conversations with the landowner, in this case, Union Development. We're actually discussing with them again on Friday. There's essentially a letter of intent to sell the land that we need, as I pointed out earlier, to the city for the parking garage. And that would again be based on an appraisal that we have done with MVRTA. Appropriation of the funds for 100% design, and that's where, as the mayor indicated, we need to show the FDA that we have put aside this funds for final design in order to obtain and get access to the $2 million from the federal government for construction. And the same applies with the $5 million from the state. The state's monies and the federal government monies are only for construction. So we as a city need to demonstrate that we put the money aside for the design and are ready to pursue on that, so that they can then hand off to us the full $70 million in total for construction. The council meeting dates that are relevant, and Heather pointed this out to the council earlier, we apologize if there might have been any confusion, is the Budget and Finance Committee meeting tonight. That's our presentation and overview of the materials. Council approval we're requesting by February 29th, but no later than the 14th, which is the council's last meeting or last applicable meeting before the end of the month in March. That allows us to prepare and compile the final application to the FDA for the construction funds. And then the additional council meetings, as the mayor indicated, we're happy to have additional meetings or follow up with you as necessary between now and then to answer any additional questions you may have. So with that, I'll pass it back to the chair. Any questions?
I'll first take questions from members of the Budget and Finance Committee.
Andy, can you go back to that slide on the different schemes?
This one here?
Yeah. Okay, so help me with this. Let's just stick with number one. Okay? And I'm trying to figure out how we got the cost per space, because if I do 3,654,000 divided by 204, I come up with 17.9 a space.
Sure.
Okay, wait a minute, let me finish the question. If I add 7 million to that 3,000,006, I come up with 52,000 a space. And then when I go to the MVRTA's drafts for Scheme 1, which is, I believe, attachment 10, it comes up with a number of 34,003 per space. So I'm just trying to figure out where that number comes from. And then that goes all of them.
Sure, so I recognize it can be a little confusing between the summary we're providing and the more detailed spreadsheet you see as a background. A couple of things to consider, and then I can sort of explain how these numbers are related. The cost per space, this first row right here is the cost per space for above ground parking spaces. This is the portion of those spaces, if there are any involved, and in 1B.
Yeah, can you stick with scheme one? That's the only one I'm really talking about.
I'm sorry, which one?
Scheme one,
Scheme 1, yeah.
because it's simple.
So in scheme 1, this, for instance, this one here, this is the 28.6, is basically, what they did was they looked at garages that were recently constructed and then extrapolated from the years that they were built, added in an increase, basically cost per year increase based on market cost, to reach a cost per space that they thought was reasonable based on the scale of the garage. So one thing that happens is with a smaller garage, you're building less spaces, so you're not getting the cost effectiveness of building 1,000 spaces and thereby breaking the cost of foundation work and things like that over a broader number of spaces. So that's why when we run into things like scheme 2B, where we're going horizontally across the land, that cost bumps up a bit because we're buying additional land, possibly doing more demolition, in this case also having underground parking.
Right, I get that, but I'm still zoning in on scheme one. When you take the $7 million and you take the $3,654,000, add those together, divided by 204, it comes up to $52,000 a space, $52,229 a space.
Oh, okay. We have land acquisition costs and we have facade work, for instance, so there are some additional costs that go into our project that are unique to our project that are not construction costs. So these are construction
Well, where's that money
costs.
coming from then? 'Cause what I'm trying to get around here is we have $7 million, we're going to bond $33.6 million, and now there are more costs?
No, so absorbed in the, when you look at the spreadsheets in your attachments, which are the ones that were provided by MPRTA, more detailed breakdown,
Yeah.
what you'll see is a footnote in that table, earlier on in the table, further up, that explains that there's a land acquisition cost, depending on how much area we're acquiring. So, if you look at the site layout, if we build only in this area here, we're paying only roughly $2 million for the land. If we have to buy additional land out here, there's a couple $100,000 more to buy that land. There's also an indication in the table there about the facade markups.
Let me just tell you, I think you deduct 2.1 million, which is the land acquisition cost, then you deduct the, did we include the 1.5 in the facade for construction, or is that outside of construction cost?
So outside of construction
All
costs,
right, so it's deduct the,
But that's still all in the bond.
yes,
So that's the bond number right there, right? $3,654,000.
but you add the 7 to it, and all of those costs are included.
Right.
But you extract the cost for the land acquisition plus the facade, and that's what gives you
The
cost per
28.6.
space. Yes.
So that's really not a real cost per space then, because you got to add everything else in there, right?
well, it's construction costs. Construction costs.
Right.
That's why we mentioned in the report to the council, we have some unique parameters here that are driving the cost a little bit higher, which is that, one, we need to acquire the land, we don't currently own it, and two, the facade needs to be treated a little bit more detail. We know that's a high demand here. So we've marked up another extra $1 million in our budget to cover additional facade treatment.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I'm still hung up on, yeah,
Let me just jump in, because on the detail of scheme 1,
It's
its construction cost indicated is 204 parking spaces and $34,310.
Yeah, that's how that's.
If you wrap everything into it.
Right.
Pardon
If
me?
you wrap the cost of all the other costs into it.
The soft cost,
Yes,
but not the land.
correct.
I'm not sure if between the budget and finance committee and other councils, if there's a different way that you'd like to present it to be sure to clarify that information, we're having to update a spreadsheet and show that.
Well, it just would be nice to have a piece of paper that had the same numbers here that are up there.
Can I just, Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Councilor
this is along the same lines as Councilor Cronin's question. I mean, I think it would be helpful if you did it as a sources and uses, so at the top, you know, where's the money coming from? I mean, you can flip it around, basically, with revenue and expense kind of thing. Yeah, I'm doing the math similarly, and I'm a little short myself, but it's adding all of the costs, the so-called soft costs, with the actual cost per space, and you add all that up, and then you deduct 7 million out of that, and, you know, so what we're saying here in this slide is that the city's on the hook for the 3-point in scheme 1,
Correct.
3.6
Right.
million dollars. But that would be helpful, just so we really understand.
Yeah, that's a good point. We can do that.
And just follow up on that scheme there. This is more for the audience. You'll also have to add 4 feet in height to each of those heights for the parapet wall. Is that associated? It's just not up there. There's also the stairwell and the elevator shaft. There's more so than.
Sure, and Councilor Cronin brings up a good point. So in the design, and again, this is just three-dimensional to give you a sense of scale, because this footprint right here is laid out like this, that corner right there, which is at the intersection of Titcomb Street and Merrimack Street, at that corner, first of all, around the entire upper facade, they'll have to be built with the safety wall instead of the wall, parapet wall. That's typical of top floors and garages. But at this corner right here, there will be an additional 11 feet for a stairwell and 14 feet, basically a rectangular shape there. That's 14 feet for the elevator shaft. That's to make a functional elevator shaft and stairwell. So at that particular corner, the rest of the building does not have that element.
Yeah, I'll yield because I have.
Council Cameron.
Thank you. I have several questions. Just regarding the height, as Councilor Cronin says, in the packet that's available on the website and that the council received, you know, you talked about the mean, the height based on the floor, and then the parapet, which you just discussed, in the elevator. Do we have to have an elevator? And I say that not as somebody who is not sympathetic to access for people with disabilities, but many garages, some garages anyway that I'm familiar with, don't have those. They have the handicapped spots on the first floor. You know, what's our take on that, or people have built garages?
Our designers have told us that we need to have an elevator facility. We can talk to them about the possibility of making it very clear to call out spaces in certain areas of the garage, but when we discussed with them the possibilities, they were pretty clear to us that we needed to have an elevator that provided also to the upper floors to make sure that anybody, you know, because you don't know necessarily how many people are going to come in and need to be, you know, you might have people who are not disabled per se, but still need some assistance getting down. So they had recommended to us, at least according to the codes, having at least one elevator to provide to the garage in this case.
For this option 1B, where's that elevator shaft?
Right, so in all scenarios, the elevator shaft is here, and this is the corner of Merrimack Street and Titcomb Street. And that's the reason for that is that that's where we expect most of the pedestrians to want to go.
I think that's the best place for that. In terms of the height, that land is, as the abutters know, is quite graded, and I'm going to say the bottom left corner, maybe the high point, it definitely slopes down towards the upper right, which is probably the lowest. Upper right, the upper left is lower than the lower left. In general, it all kind of goes that way. When you're talking about height, so to make this thing level, you're gonna have to go underground somewhere, I think. So how does that affect the height compared to other buildings? And can you just discuss that?
Sure. So I believe that the fitness factory is about 33 to 34 feet right now in height. That would be this facade right here. The existing structure, you can kind of see it mainly underneath the garage. They would essentially cut back into the grade here a slight bit. So if you're correct, it would be embedded into the slope a bit, a couple of feet, you know, underground, if you will. But the way that we're, again, with the first two scenarios, we're not recommending we do anything fully underground, whereby we do ventilation systems. But you're correct that if you go back from Merrimack Street, from this end, we'd be essentially cutting into the slope a little bit. So the garage does end up being shorter here essentially as we're pulling it down to make it level with Merrimack Street. So those cars coming in out of that small parking area here would be coming in and pulling into something essentially level. If you've been in that parking lot right now, you can see there's a little bit of a slope that goes up the hill towards Pleasant Street, and we're basically cutting into that to make it a little bit flatter, bringing it down.
Thank you. A couple of questions for John Burke, the parking consultant. I liked a couple of things that you said, and obviously we remember you from a few years ago, and you said that this all needs to fit together. It's a garage, it's the lots, it's street parking, and generally I think those recommendations are conservative and reasonable. I like the resident parking. I think residents need to get a break somewhere in here. My question is, in terms of the rate at the garage, if it's an hour for me to come downtown, say I'm not a resident, an hour for me to park in the garage, or it's an hour for me to park in Green Street, why would I go to the garage? I've been saying all along, I think this garage, the whole system needs to fund the bond that's going to cover this and also allow for some downtown improvements. But if we price the garage too high, people aren't going to use it. So how do we find that balance?
I mean, I think it starts with the fact that, the garage is a different product and a different level of service than you're getting on the street. I think the big issue is, and we talked about it the importance of safety, security, and cleanliness. It has to be perceived and be safer and cleaner because you're operating at a premium rate. And I think that is one of the things with parking garage, so we want to emphasize that. It's also providing cover from the elements, which is not to be underestimated from the user. That $1 an hour rate in the garage is pretty much what people typically see as reasonable. I do a lot of surveys in communities, and we talk about the reasonableness of a rate for the garage. That $1 an hour is almost always perceived that way, even when the rates are 50 cents that we're talking about going. The biggest thing, for pass holders first, is that when you buy a permit in a garage, you're guaranteed a space. We're not going to turn you away out. And that's not the case with your permits in the streets or the lots where you have that situation. A lot of tourists and visitors rely heavily on social media now. We look at, a lot of mobile apps looking at, make me a pedestrian as quick as you can. Get me to that facility. Coming off Route 1 or 95, want to get in and get on my feet and get on my way. And I think it's a reasonable rate for that. And, I've heard this before with new garages, like in neighborhood, we're not going to get in, and they do. Because again, we're offering a higher level of service, customer service is not so forth.
Just a couple of quick follow-ups. I did note in the operating budgets for the different scenarios, these would be, you would pay by credit card, through, either you do the kiosk or you do it at the end. But there is 24/7, one person covering that, so there's a live person.
So that back to the security, we built that in to be conservative, but certainly now we're doing a lot more with surveillance and video and remote access. But for now, we want to make sure that it's intended on 24/7. And that's built in.
I think that's great. One more quick question and then a comment. You mentioned early evening, maybe varying rates, weekends. Can that also be applied seasonally? Obviously, summer is our big time. How do you vary rates for a garage? Can you vary rates for the lots as well? Logistically.
We're working with the city of Portsmouth right now on demand-based pricing. And so we're looking just at those variations, not just by season, but by time of day. They can be completely surcharged at 6 o'clock. So we're looking at that and how the key challenge of that is not being so changeable where the consumer can't make an educated decision on an economic choice. The information has to get to the user in time, so you can't be so variable. But yeah, you absolutely can vary. And that's sort of my point here is you're really not going to know until you open. And there's a desire to come in and make all these, it's best to wait and see how the trends play out.
Thank you.
I have a point of clarification on what I thought Councilor Cameron's question was. He asked if you're charging $1 an hour in the garage and $1 an hour in the Green Street lot, what would be the incentive to use the garage. And this rate structure, if someone is short-term, less than an hour, the incentive is to park outside. The degree street, it's $2 for less than an hour as you have it in the garage, and $1 outside.
Right.
So you're providing a disincentive to use the garage short-term.
Yes, it's very, very common, that's a very common rate structure, and the reason is typically, it isn't so easy to get up to the third floor, get down, get to where you're going, and get back within that hour. So you'll typically see that first hour charged at $2 and then drop to $1, which is what we were saying. For those businesses that want to do validation for short-term, that's another good reason to start at 2, because you can comp it down to 1 for validation. That's for another point in time. But yes, absolutely, it's all about getting people to the parking that's most convenient for them.
And so it would be more convenient to park in the outside lots, short term. Is that short term up to 8 hours?
Well,
6 hours?
It's a 3 hour.
Still a 3 hour limit.
So,
Then they'd be looking to stay in the garage.
and again, in the garage, and if you look at Haverhill, you look at, for instance, Lowell, you'll see them, I'm coming down to $8 over 8 hours. They come down quicker to their max rate. You can vary those in depending on how utilization shakes up. I think from the outset, the longer you stay in the garage, the better it will be.
So, I have a question on, and we didn't go over it here, but on the projected revenue over 10 years. First of all, the assumption is that we are not going to change rates over 10 years, because in the data that was produced. I'm looking at projected income and expense budget, but I'm correct on that, right? So for the whole 10 years. And then there's some pretty remarkable increases in revenue. And I'm just wondering how you projected that.
For instance, from year 1 to year 2 in the garage, and Laz provided these projections. In year one, I mean, just how conservative, I think he's starting with, 10 resident passes and 10 for the garage, 10 regular passes, and he ramps up to about 80 or 90 passes over the first year. And that's what you're seeing in other communities with similar demand. But typically what we see in the first year is a real slow slug. We want to be conservative here, so that first year we're showing is very low. But as soon as you have approval here, I'd like to see cities get right out and start selling that, start the marketing program and move ahead. You have a whole year sometimes to get that ramped up. But you don't experience that first year low, which I'm seeing every community when they build it. So we built in the law to reflect that.
So,
worst case.
So how do you do that? Some sort of estimate on capacity usage? Is that
Yeah, he's using rates of use based on new facilities and other conditions. Considering the demand as well.
And so, I mean, never mind the parking permits, but I guess the parking meter revenue includes both what would be the lots, the outside lots, and the garage.
Oh, correct, yeah, if you're looking at the high level pro forma, the parking meter revenue would just include the surface lots, the intermodal facility revenue,
Okay.
the next line down would be just the garage parking.
So we're projecting some rather large increases in parking over 10 years.
Yes,
Based on what?
yeah, so we're basing it on a year 1 doubling of the hourly fee from 50 cents
Yeah.
to $1.
But that's in year 1.
Yeah, and I did include some conservative haircuts off the top, 15% in year 1, 10% in year 2, 5% in year 3, just to account for those partners who might be pushed away by the doubling of the hourly fee and might not park there anymore. But presumably over time, they get used to it and we're back to 100%.
Yeah, if I could speak to that.
I mean, it's a $260,000 increase over a 10-year period in the outside lots. I mean, is that driven by our anticipation, an assumption there, that more people would be coming to Newburyport?
Most of it is the doubling of the rate, and we've got an increase. Most of it is the doubling of the rate. It's every year.
Well, that brings it up to 300, but then in year 10, we've got revenue up to 400.
Yeah, and then from that, we're using a growth factor of 3% each year, presumably to keep up with expenses, which Laz recommended as the average for what we see departments.
If I can give you a little comfort on that projection, I do a lot of these for a lot of communities. We double rates, of course, double rates in Plymouth, Mass. Typically,
Double rates.
Double rates.
But I'm not, you know.
Oh, you're more concerned with the...
Yeah, I get the rate thing, I understand that. I'm not.
Well, if I could just make the comment about the doubling of the rates, the haircut that he was talking about is the perception that people then see the dollar and say, oh, I'm going into the neighborhoods. What we have seen is that haircut 50% doesn't actually cost. We've actually had very close to double digit revenue.
So when you look at these other garages, do you have sort of a high estimate, low estimate, medium? I mean, I'm assuming you're not doing any kind of econometric analysis here.
This isn't that kind of thing. But to get to your point, just the way the banks look at it, the meter revenue is real. Your demand here is real. You have a history of revenue at those. Yeah, it's pretty well known. Yeah. The garage isn't expected. Yeah. So absolutely, we look at other places that have done it with less demand than we have here, and with more demand. And we try to find out. That's sort of what that is.
Good, thank you. I have just a clarifying question. I guess this goes to the NRA. You said that you wanted to get 100 parking spaces off the waterfront, and you wanted to have no more than 150?
That was the number we put in the Newburyport submitted.
Not there, 307. How many spaces?
307.
307.
Yeah, I mean,
so if you take 100 off, how are you going to get from, you have 270 left, how do you get down to 125?
Well, that's a question. We were asked for a letter, can you commit to reducing the lots by 100? I think it would permanently help to reduce the lots if we want to do that.
So we're really talking getting NRA lots down to 270 if we do that, right?
There's a lot of balls in the air right now, so we have to see what it is. There's another 200 right now.
But and ideally, the NRA would like to get it down eventually to 125.
Now, remember we put in a report for 150, this was possibly the best and good number, so we do come up with a large amount of time. Here's some way to go.
Thank you. Any further questions from members of the Budget and Finance?
Just one quick one for John, for more for the audience to begin with. In your report, it says it is assumed that on-street parking in and around the parking garage will be restricted to either short-term parking, commercial loading, resident-only parking, leaving free, unregulated all-day parking immediately outside and around the parking garage can have a negative impact on the garage use and revenue. The city should carefully review the appropriateness of on-street regulations within a 5-minute walk radius of the new garage. And keeping that statement in mind, I guess, you talked about Portsmouth, Portland, Salem, Lowell, and Haverhill. Now, do those communities have paid on-street parking?
Yes.
Okay, so would it be your recommendation that we kind of go in that direction? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that, and this happens frequently as well, it's another one of the disappointments along with, not gearing up in the year that we have design, but oftentimes around the facility, there'll be pockets of unregulated all-day parking, sometimes right outside the garage. And that doesn't do anything to help the utilization of the garage. Yeah, and they'll find it, and then, I did a project in Evanston, Illinois, and there was this, and there were places that I didn't even know about parking garages, that people will find, and they will cause problems in the neighborhood. So my only point is, really, you gotta think about it differently. Do that 5-minute walk radius around that garage and say, would someone who sees this is now a good deal, want to park there all day, what does that do to them? That's it. So it could be 2 hours, it could be resident only, it could be a commercial loading zone, drop off there at 50, it could be a lot of things in that case.
Follow up on that, so the on-street parking, the intent is to remain, have it remain unpaid. Great. Any proposal for changing the length of time people?
I think that that's a conversation that we would have to have as, the council, and as John said, looking around the area around the garage. Again, we've done this as we introduced paid parking. We saw problems as spillover into sections of Ward 2 or sections of Ward 3, and that's when we made changes and developed resident stickers or resident only parking and more time limits. And I think those are the kinds of things that are easy to accommodate. As we're working on design, we certainly can continue working with John to look at all of those parameters and make decisions about what makes sense, and then make changes as impact happens once the garage is open, particularly in the residents who live around the garage.
So if most of the on-street free parking were taken up by employees of downtown businesses who were moving their cars, would we then consider charging for those spaces as a way of inducing them into the garage?
Well, I think if they get these discounted passes, monthly passes, if you look at, what was $75 a month if you're a full-time employee to park. So I think that might be something to get people into.
Questions from any other councilors? Council argument?
And I guess we just go down the line, is that right? That's okay. Well, first, I want to give credit where it's due. Many of us, especially as a Ward 2 council, were waiting for alternatives analysis, and I want to thank Andy for getting that out. We are where we are. This is good. We can start having a real conversation. I will say, however, I'd still like to see some kind of a massing study or viewpoint analysis. I mean, I have some familiarity with heights in construction, so I can sort of understand the difference between 36.75 feet and 42 feet, including the parapet, and I can relate it. But if we could do a computer simulation of some kind, I think that would help the council weigh the pros and cons of these different alternatives. A couple other things. I'm wondering for the parking analysis, how many monthly spaces did we assume at, say, a stabilized year?
I believe it's 150.
Okay.
150 range.
All right, and 1 year very conservative. How many was in year one? It was just a
From 20 to 90, maybe at the end of the year.
okay. All right.
Okay,
And then,
what was the first answer, 115 or 150?
150. That'd be good to see.
and to check that, the New England Development had already asked us for 90 right out of the gate, so that's not great. On resident parking, just to address that quickly, I mean, in Ward 2, look, it's already spreading like wildfire. Even if we don't do a parking garage, there's going to be more and more resident parking. That's a fact, and we have to do that to protect residents. I see that all the time. All right, I heard the explanation on sites. I want to understand, though, very clearly pros and cons of this site versus one other, and that is Green Street, because we own it. And the reason why I ask is not because I want to reopen anything from a previous council in 2010, but the alternatives we have now, say you're doing about 244 spaces in a building that's 202 feet by 122, we wouldn't need to build on all of Green Street. Green Street's a lot bigger than that. So wouldn't it be feasible physically to fit that rectangle on the edge of Green Street? I'm not saying I'm pushing that. I just want to know why not look at that? It would save us land acquisition. Now, I can already give you the bad side of it would be I wouldn't want buses there. So one advantage of the Titcomb and Merrimack location is it's a much better location, I think, for intermodal. But again, I'm trying to weigh the pros and cons. If we were going to do a really big footprint like the L-shaped one, okay, that would not fit at Green Street without disrupting the Green Street lot. I understand that. But now that we're down to a 202 by 122 box, what would happen if we did that at Green Street? And for example, another ramification would be we have until March 31st to get an application in to MDRTA so they can get into the feds. I get that. But from what I heard from the paperwork, it sounded like we need to show site control by that time. And we own it. So again, I'm not saying we should switch gears. I just want to know, to be diligent, why not? Now, in the Titcomb scenarios, I guess my question is, I'm a little confused about the land acquisition and demolition costs, because considering that we only, the analysis we're being told is we have about $5 million worth of bonding capacity that we can safely use. And if over $2 million of that is going to go towards land acquisition, I am going to get down to the nickel and dime. So I wonder if we could have a better explanation of how you got the number. For example, if we do the 122 by 202, we don't need the whole site. We only need a portion of it. And then what is the cost during the development of demolishing that building versus our cost? I would assume it's much more expensive for us because we have to be prevailing wage and so on, and they don't. So I'm wondering how those numbers were arrived at. I'll finish up. I think you got questions earlier from the council on ensuring that we control the design of the building. When I say we, I mean the city. So, there are some assurances about that in the materials, thank you, but I think we're going to want to see maybe a sample agreement on that. And also, the management of the building, a little more detail on that. I think you're going to hear the same thing from Councilor Devlin. Years ago, my last point, the City Council adopted an ordinance which said that you're going to get special dispensation to meet your parking requirement by using the parking garage. You have to go to the City Council and get a special permit, and you have to pay $5,000 fee per space. We've never followed through on that. That fund was never created, and I'm wondering if this isn't the time to do that, and whether the administration is ready to talk about it. Those are my comments.
Does anyone want to take on Green Street?
Well, I was on the council at the time when the study, was presented, and we had the consultants who went through every single site and talked about the pros and cons. And through that discussion and through conversations with a butters neighborhood, church was very concerned at the time. The residents at Merrimack Place were very concerned. The disruption to businesses downtown. I mean, just look at things like doing lighting, reducing turrets, and upgrading a fountain, and repaving the lot. It's very, very difficult for the businesses downtown. This would be a year-and-a-half long project. It would be very difficult. It would affect the lights. It wouldn't accommodate. I don't think we would be able to keep the $2 million because we wouldn't be doing any motor facility. Then, in turn, affects the $5 million because that's our match to the feds from the state. So that all of that comes into play with that. The council voted 10-1 against Green Street. I think Councilor Connell was the only councilor who really supported the Green Street lot, and it was the decision was made in favor of Titcomb Street, partially because of access coming from Route 1 through Merrimack Valley to capture the traffic before it came into downtown. There were lots of, I don't remember off the top of my head all of those reasons, but those were some of the primary reasons as we had the consultants move through all of the 7 different sites that they did extensive study on, and that for those reasons, in terms of the soils, the condition, ease of construction, less disruption, concern about the church, the foundation, the age of that building, the Montessori school, there was another school there at the time, the butters on the Merrimack Landing cutting off the light for them in terms of building something there, and so there were a whole combination of those factors that then in turn moved it over to Titcomb Street site, which was closed by the council.
Mr. Chairman, I ask a follow-up question just while we're on the Green Street, Madam Mayor, do you remember where it ranked? It alludes to rankings of the sites in the summary we received. It doesn't say where Green Street ranked, or Andy, do you know?
Yeah. Second. Titcomb was first, and then Green Street was second.
Well, from the consultants, give their sort of professional opinion about technical issues, and where it's related to traffic circulation downtown, does it help us solve traffic circulation and so forth. Titcomb Street ranked second, as I recall. Green Street was actually number 1 from the technical engineering perspective, in terms of land acquisition costs and so forth, proximity to the downtown. However, at the end of the day, considering some of the neighborhood impacts and so forth, it sort of goes down a bit because, as Councilor Agnew mentioned, there were concerns from abutters to that site. So even though it's closer to the core of the downtown, and you might want to put the garage as close to the core as you can, Titcomb Street allows folks to actually come off of, say, Route 1, that Merrimack Street area, and park their cars before driving through and circulating further down Merrimack Street, almost north of Market Square. So from a cost perspective, certainly Green Street is more viable because we are on the land. But from the contextual issues, Green Street is getting lower, and that's where ultimately the report reported back. I was not at the time, I apologize, but I know that both the council, going back to the dialogue of the final report, was that the council members a very strong consensus of the meeting themselves here that Green Street was not the location that people are comfortable having, even if it was, things staging at half the site.
If I may. So, we're at a point now where we've had some information sent to abutters, we've had abutters meetings, we've had some, at least some documentation given to them, and the abutters are having an issue with this space as well. How did it come? Did we have designs and plans for a spot at Green Street? And how did the abutters come?
Yeah.
How did the abutters come forward then for that, but not for Titcomb?
Not having been at the time, I don't want to speculate as to what went on during the public meeting. I'm not sure.
There were schematic designs for each of the sites, or top sites that were presented and were summarily rejected at that time.
Former Mayor Carrier seems to want
I just want to
give some
mention,
light to
when
this.
we got the $5 million originally from Senator DeJuga, it was meant for the Green Street lot. And at the time, then we formed a traffic committee, which Bob was on also. And Chuck Legassi was on it, and Ed Mobley. And because the fitness factory had a lot of people coming in and out at that time, they were pushing then for the Titcomb Street area there because they wanted it for access to the fitness factory. But actually, Green Street lot was what it was intended for. The abutters in the buildings on either side of Green Street objected, and the church objected because they were afraid that we were going to do a level under and then a level over, and there was a schematic drawing that gave like another kind of a half level, and it was all landscaping. It wasn't a brick building or whatever. It was landscaping with shops around the bottom that would give money to the garage. And I was there on the committee also, but there was a lot of opposition to it. They said the church opposed it because they said blasting would not be good for the old church. But then a couple of years ago, they blasted and put it in the basement in the church. So in Newburyport, everything is a hearsay. It affects the person who's living near it. But I have to say, it must be in the planning office. There was really a very nice schematic drawing for a really nice parking garage. I forget how many spaces were in that, but it can be built on the Green Street lot without affecting the buildings on either side, because you're right, Councilor Eigenman, the Green Street lot is bigger than the footprint for the garage. So you could fit something in there, nicely landscaped, open, kind of a schematic thing that fits in with the landscape surrounding it, and you wouldn't have the big brick monstrosity that we're seeing here. That's only my opinion. But yes, that was intended for the Green Street lot. And Bob knows there was a lot of opposition, mostly from the landowners down there, which is now the Win-Win Development, because they wanted the garage to serve them. I was against it because it was the taking of all those properties around it, and the city couldn't afford to do it at the time. So the $5 million has sat there for 17 years now. So, I mean, it would be nice to have some more parking, and I certainly want to see the park extended. But
Well, let me just clarify what I'm saying.
that's just a little background. Sorry to interrupt, Mayor.
Okay, so to be specific, again, I recognize the issue of, and my comments on myself, but on my own, I am very much worried about disrupting businesses on In Street and Pleasant. But again, the footprint we're talking about now is about half the size of the footprint that was studied before. The footprint that was studied before would have been a very long garage that started at Green Street and extended all the way back behind the Montessori School. 202 feet only goes to about Unicorn Street. It's a different coverage. That's my only point. Now, but I acknowledge the intermodal, it sounds like, is the key to it. In order to get the $2 million, we have to have some kind of a bus stop.
There's actually 7, because the $5 million from the state is part of the match that is required from the federal government for the intermodal component.
So that's the key. That's what I'm hearing is the key.
You have a chance of losing $7 million.
I got you, because you need to accommodate the buses. All right, thank you.
Any questions from any other Councilor Jones?
And I still have some questions. I wanted to hit it while we were talking about that.
I just have a few different random things. The first thing, and thank you for all the detail. This is what I've been asking for, and this is a lot of information, so I appreciate that. A lot of good information here. The height, I'd love, and I think Councilor Eigenman mentioned this a few minutes ago, I'd love to see where the height of this building sort of, the view from the landscape. I just would, we're looking at all this, but I really don't know. If I'm looking at it, what do I see around? Do I see any other buildings? Is it gigantic? Does it blend right in? I'd like to know sort of where it falls into the landscape. And I know we have pictures of other garage, but I'd really like to see something right in our spot. What's it, height-wise, what's it going to look like? I'm happy to see a quarterly permit being allowed for employees. I think, at least from what I hear out there, one of the issues that we have with seasonal employees is they don't buy a permit, and we're playing that game of who's moving their car, where are they parking it, is it in front of your house, or your house, or your house? We've had a problem with employee permits since the day that it was passed into law. And we've really never addressed it, and maybe this is the proper way to address it. And then, discussing whether, these employees are parking on the street or whatever, that, for me personally, the last thing I would like to see is us to have paid parking on the streets, because we have so many neighbors that live within the city, and they really depend on that parking in front of their house. And I'd like to see if we needed 2 hours of resident-only type of idea to get people into the garage, but also to acknowledge that we have neighbors that need to park in front of their house and they do live in the city. So I think that's important to our city, that we take care of the residents first and worry about that revenue later. What else did I have here? Oh, when I was looking at the Councilor Contar mentioned this. When you look at the year 10 projected revenue, it's like $850,000. And this is from the parking meter revenue. And just a couple of thoughts on that, because I don't really understand the progression of this number, because we only have X amount of spots, and we know what we charge for them, and we also know what our numbers are as far as, you know, how many people use the parking lots currently. Like, I know how many people, revenue-wise, used the parking lot last January, and it's not a whole lot. It's a pretty small amount of money.
There's no emergency.
What's that?
There's no emergency.
Well, yeah, well, that happens, right? It's part of life. So I'm just looking at this number that's starting at 585 and then climbs up to 850.
Attachment 11.
Chapter 11. And I'm just wondering, does this number take an account of continuing to raise the amount that we park per hour? Or are we assuming more people are going to fill our lots in the winter than do now? What's the occupancy rate? Are we reflecting in that 100 spots are going to leave the NRA? I'm curious about all where this number came from.
Yeah, there's a wide variety of factors. I mean, the most basic thing is that the current revenue is around $350,000 right now from parking meters. You double that, you're at $700,000. That's just simple math. And then from there, we use an escalator each year of 3% in revenue growth. So would that be more people parking? Would it be adjustments to the rate? It could be a variety of factors, but to keep up with rising costs, there would need to be some changes to the rates in the service cost over the next 10 years.
So in short, you're projecting at 3% cost in parking rates over the years.
That's correct.
Okay. The other thing I noticed was parking fines. At least between 2016 and 2017, they stay the same, and then they continue to escalate. Again, it's the same thing. Are we thinking about raising parking fines? Are we figuring more people will be in lots? Or how do we get to those numbers?
Same thing. It would be a combination of more volume in the lots, greater enforcement, and possibly changes to the fines. But that again was a basic 3%.
Gotcha. And Mr. Burke, you work with Salem, the city of Salem? Okay. Do you know, do they vary their rates? Do you have any idea?
In the garage and lots, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so they have the lots, for example, that is over off of Lee Street, whereas the DA's offices, there by Indian Law, that's $1.75 an hour. It's a pretty lousy lot. And the garage is 75 cents.
Gotcha.
Which is around the corner.
Right. I parked in the one around the corner on Saturday night. It was 25 cents an hour. And I was thinking to myself, there's no way in October this garage is 25 cents an hour in Salem in October. There's no way. So they have to be flexing their rates with the season.
Parking.
And, you know, as somebody coming into Salem, I knew when I came into Salem, I was heading to that lot. I wasn't searching for a spot. I wanted to park there. I didn't think about what the rate was going to be. I just knew I was parking there. Because I was heading over into Pickering Walk. I was pleasantly surprised that it was 25 cents, but my brain was thinking about what we're doing in Newburyport, thinking, yes, they're adjusting this because it's a slow night for them in the winter, and then it just brings people in. So I think that's pretty interesting. And that's all I have, so thank you.
Councilor Donovan.
Yes, thank you. And Andy, so you've given us a hard deadline, 3/31/2016, to get this documentation in, or we're using
lose the federal and state funds. Is that in writing anywhere? Is there a document that they say that we have to, because I just don't want to, in the summary, it appears that we have till March in one place, but then there's another mention later on that we have to do it before the funds get, expended for other more shovel-ready projects. And so that last one sounds, likely to me is that what we're really trying to do, there's a finite pool of money and there's lots of demand for it, and if we don't get our place in line first, that money, once it's gone, we can't get it. So that's just...
Sure, yeah, to clarify, so the March 31st deadline, which requires an action, council by action before that, is actually because the FTA is expecting and has a deadline of March 31st, and they've given to the Regional Transit Authority, where the application for the $2 million needs to be submitted by that date. So that is a hard deadline in the middle of the day. My comment about the possibility of funds being drawn from some other shovel-ready projects is this is pretty common with the use of federal and state funds. Agencies at a higher level like to funnel their money towards projects that are shovel-ready. Similar to the MassWorks grant that we got, we needed to show that we could make the project shovel-ready this year. That's where we got that grant. So in this case, the concern there is that the folks from Mass DOT at the state level have also been contacting us and saying, where are you with your garage project? We've awarded those funds to you, but we want to make sure you're doing it this year because we have demands for other projects as well. And as you can imagine, from what you hear in the news, Mass DOT and the state have lots of other infrastructure roadway projects to do. So they want to make sure that we are actually going to be using it as they're getting demands for other projects. They don't want to be having that money sit there. So that is not a specific date we have, but we do know that they want to get us shovel ready this year, and as much as the FDA does, with that hard March 31st deadline for us to have that.
Okay. Ethan, I had some of the similar questions to Councilor Junta. In your revenue expenditure projections, so on the intermodal facility revenue line, I got 125% increase from year 1 to year 2, then it was 4% thereon. Forget about what percentages, you were saying 3%. You just as likely could have picked 5% and 4% and 3%. Is there any basis behind, is there any math behind the percentages you picked? Maybe this is for Mr. Burke as well. Are those typical revenue increases, every 4% every year, or are you just using a number to show we think it's going to go up and 4% seems reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's coming out of the last part of projections and based on other facilities. And typically, I can speak for a number of facilities that I've managed personally, they typically do go up, sometimes more than that percentage, over the years. That's probably an annualized basket over a 10-year period, spread across. Obviously, things happen, right? Things happen. The development occurs, say, across the street, and you get 90 capacity in year 4. I mean, they're not projecting too much in terms of how things change. 150 spaces, 100 spaces fall off the waterfront, supply changes, people coming through. All these things happen, and that's why I say you've got to look at your rates every year, because things happen every year. So they're just annualizing that, but over a 10-year period, that's probably pretty critical for revenue growth in year 0 to year 1.
I thought your summary was particularly helpful. So do you work with Havel?
Yes.
Okay. So the Havel contract we got, the MVRTA, was a preliminary contract. I'm really looking for the lease. We're going to get from MVRTA. We're not creating the lease. Copeland and Page isn't doing it. They're going to give us their sample template lease. I'd like to see that. That's where the nuts and bolts of this is going to be. And I'd also like to see the LAZ management agreement between MVRTA and LAZ. When was Havel built? That contract was dated December. But I mean, 6 or 7 years, they're off in their budgeted projections. They're low. they lost money, and I realized there were some factors, but even in the last 6 months of December of 2016, the end of December 2015, they were only running a surplus of 2,400 some change. And they've been running this for 5 or 6 years. So I would want to know that there's some, the summary from Andy says that we'll get all the, surplus, but I want to know, I mean, the surplus that we projected is nowhere near what Haverhill seems to be getting after 5 or 6 years. What makes us different from Haverhill in that respect? Because Haverhill has people, I would imagine, driving from Plastow, Atkinson, Bradford, Georgetown, place to get on that T.
There's a number of reasons. Probably the most relevant is that the street and the lots are 50 cents where the garage is $1. It's the complete opposite of what you would typically think. Pushing people out into the public domain for long-term parkers. There's an awful lot of free parking still around here, around that garage. And they have, their meters charge like 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. So it's 3 before 3 p.m. There's just a whole host of reasons why people find less expensive options. And that's why I think this pricing structure makes a whole lot more sense.
And I think also you have to look at the fact that Haverhill is a commuter garage. It's not, Portsmouth is more of a compatible model because it's there for tourists, visitors, residents, using the restaurant downtown facilities. I think that's a difference also. And the projections from last year, the MBTA was shut down, people weren't commuting, we had a state of emergency. You can see those numbers if you look at their costs in January and February in particular, where they had significant losses. And we also know that in terms of running this garage, that the mission of the RTA is transportation, and they will be required to pick up the loss if we should have to in the facility for the first several years, and then we'll work with them on adjusting rates if they do.
All right, that's why I want to see that.
The problem is that it's difficult to get documents that are in draft form when we haven't even got to that point. We only have, there's only so many people working on this, and that we don't have a design team that is absolutely on hold. And it's difficult to get people to create documents when we don't have them under contract and we're not paying people and asking them to do free work, which is essentially what, is happening in terms of asking us to put together, contracts. Those will come as they all fall into place as you move the process forward. And every single document that we will sign, we'd be happy to share with the council. So we gave you a draft of what one would look like. But in order to take our energy rate down and put that into drafting and we're not going to do that at this exact moment until we know we're going forward.
I'd like to see their template. I mean, I can discuss this later, but I'd like, they must have templates that they use in other circumstances, the MVRGA, that use in other circumstances. We're being asked to commit a lot of money based on assumptions, and it's a contract. They could say, well, in this one, we're not going to do that. There's got to be something that we're basing this on, and I'd like to see, in a preliminary form. They have to have it. I have template contracts with everything I do. The MVRTA has to have it. They have to have a management agreement. They don't make a new manager agreement with LAZ every single time. I'd like to see that. So, but look, we can talk about those later. One of the things I'm struggling with is I would think that the commuter aspect is a consistent draw to Haverhill. It's a consistent draw of people, and we don't have that, and that makes me concerned. We also have some of the weaknesses that you described around our parking garage, where our parking garage would be. And so I think, we need to address that in order to drive people into the garage. But we need to tell everybody about it so it doesn't come as a surprise, So that's where this is where, I've got more questions than I can ask about right now, but they're questions that will get me to a place, hopefully the answer will get me to a place where I can fully support this. So,
I think just respond to that.
Sure.
Around the garage, I think that's fixable. That's not a major issue. It's just something, as I mentioned, that doesn't often get done until after the garage has been open a while. So why not do it before? the things that you have going through is a very strong demand. You have different uses, you have visitors, you have residents. When we think of a public garage, the idea is to use each space 3 times. You know, when the office worker leaves, you want to fill that with the residents. The residents, weekends is slow, we want the visitors. You've got that setup where you can make maximum use of the public facility. That's what we look for. So you've got it all in that regard. Some of these other communities we're talking about may have 1 or 2 of those pieces, and not all of them. So, you know, if that helps any.
Let me ask another question. So, Ethan, you have violations going up, and I think Larry touched on this. But I'm not sure how the revenue we get from violation goes up when we're taking 100 spots off the waterfront and we're trying to drive more people into the parking garage. John, I'm correct on this, we're not going to have a lot of violations within the parking garage. We're not, after the $10 maximum is reached, we're not towing them or ticketing them. So I'm not sure how we got increase. Is it just the same thing? That's the same reason we assume it's going to go up and we'll raise fine and things like that?
Yeah, it's based on actuals going up every year. But, you know, just touching on the point about the 100 spaces on the waterfront, these pro forma numbers still keep the agreements in place with the NRA and waterfront costs. Will those agreements be in place over the next 10 years? I wouldn't think so. So, I mean, if you take out those 2 expenditures alone, that makes our model even more conservative. So you're right, yes, fines are projected to go up 3% in this model. Will they in reality? Not sure. Will changes to on-street parking cause more fines? Let's say the council decides to shorten the on-street spot from 2 hours to 2.5 hours. Will there be more violators? Will that cause more fines? We don't know, but I think it's safe to assume that we can at least work from actuals and show some growth.
If I could just add, I'd just like to emphasize, John Burke has pointed this out before, and we've heard this in our prior meetings, but I think it's also, he's referenced it briefly tonight. The city has all the tools that it needs to control the rates and the demand, both on the surface parking lot, the street parking lot, and the garage. We just need to keep periodic monitoring of that to see where those price, points need to be. So, I think this is something that's why we pulled John in, because John is so familiar with how to do those communities based on their individual needs, the capacity spaces that are available, and so forth. So we have the ability to adjust and refine that as time goes on to make sure that the numbers, are working at a given period of time. But we need to recognize that it's a living, breathing program that we might need to modify, 4 years down the road. We might need to look at the rates again. Whatever that time frame is.
All right, thank you. I've got some more questions. I'm going to yield to other people, so hopefully we can get some calls.
8:33, and then we got 1, 2, 3, 4 councilors left to go with any questions. Councilor Earls?
I'll be quick. Just one policy. I don't, years ago, when I advocated for paid parking, I was told that's the end of the downtown. That's it. I was going to close the shop. It's going to be vacant. Well, that didn't happen. But the point was that it was an alternative source of income. I don't love relying it. I know it's pennies, and Mr. Berger can laugh at me and say, oh, how quaint that is. I don't believe in renting the taxpayer spaces back to them. So I don't like that little portion of it. It sets a bad precedent where every year we go back to, what's $15, what's $20? Here we go with another cup of coffee every day, and that's always the argument. So I don't love that part of it right now, and there's a lot more stuff to look at. I have a question though, the $2.1 million to purchase the property, does that include the L or not?
Right, so that does not include the L-shaped portion of the land.
Okay, now you have do you know the price if we took that out?
Yes, just to illustrate for you, the portion that we're referring to with that 2.1 is within this purple boundary here.
Yep.
So that's 2.1 basically, some change. This area is a couple $100,000 more. We have not recommended pursuing an option for the garage that goes that way, in part as one additional cost we would entail by acquiring that land.
And we don't know that number.
I don't remember off the top of my head, it's a couple $100,000. I think it's like $600,000 or $700,000.
Where will the whole thing? And it'll remain a business in there, I assume, if we were to purchase it?
If the building remains in part, we would assume that the existing businesses or replacement businesses would fill that space similar to what is there today.
And where will they park?
I'm sorry?
And where will they park?
Presumably they're going to buy, want to buy spaces in the garage or rent. If that building is fully demolished, I would assume that some sort of residential development would be done, maybe similar to what is currently across the street here. But New Development would prefer to keep some portion of that building. That's why they're looking at that option of selective demolition.
Okay. Yeah, I want to reinforce what Councilor Heigeman said about, let's look at that adjacent lot. Final thing, you have parking summary charts on each schematic, and you have efficiency numbers at each level. Right? What is that efficiency? It appears the lower the number, the greater efficiency.
Right, so you want a low number, essentially. John can probably speak to this better than I because he didn't park all the time. But from an engineer's perspective, you want to have a low number showing the greatest possible efficiency in the spaces you're creating. So that's why you see when we get to the end of the day, if it's cost per space, that ratio is reflective of how much efficiency you're getting.
And just quickly, and I'll end here, just so I can do my own analysis when I go home with this. The one efficiency number, let's say that there's an efficiency number for grade, an efficiency number for the first level, and an efficiency number for the second level. Does that first level efficiency number be affected by the second level over? In other words, if I were to chop on a 5-level building, if I were to take 3 off, could I keep the efficiency numbers of the 1 and 2?
I'm not sure how the engineers do it. I'm not sure if John even knows on the top of your head.
They're doing it by floor. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, in their breakdown, they do it by floor. I think the really important one, obviously, is costs that go into the first floor. So anything that's putting the foundation work in, retaining walls, if that's the case, columns and so forth, that's where you get the majority of your costs. Anything above that, you get more efficiency because you've already done that structural work, the majority of it. But we can find more detail about how they break it down per floor beyond that. But that's a general reason why you might see greater efficiency on upper floors and sort of reduction there in the efficiency number.
Excellent. Thank you. That's it for now.
Councilor Zaid.
Thank you. I guess I'll try and make my comments and questions and try and keep them to 5 or 6 points at most. They're basically, I'll call them 5 things that are kind of the fly in the ointment for me, I guess, so far. The questions that I still have, the questions that are making me stay up at night instead of sleeping when I should be, and I'll just list them off. Some of them have already been mentioned, but number 1 is the MVRTA aspect is still too muddy, in my opinion. I agree with Councilor Devlin that if there's a boilerplate agreement that we can look at, then that's fine. Nobody's asking anybody to put $100,000 legal work to drop our agreement, but to have something that so the Haverhill one, for example, there's a couple of interesting comments in there. One is, the MVRTA shall use good faith efforts to apply for grants for non-federal funds. I don't think in our case we have any non-federal funds we're expecting, but they basically say if we don't get the non-federal funds, this whole contract is null and void. We're free of it's item number 6 on page 3. So I just want to see if any kind of language like that exists.
No.
The second thing is
each contract will be developed according to the relationship that we have with the MVRTA, and we just ask them to please just send us a draft of one they have.
So maybe there's one that's closer, I'm not sure. But anyway, so I will say that. The second thing is, for example, in the memo, it mentions, under this agreement, any surplus revenue beyond that required by the MVRTA to operate will go back to the city, but it doesn't really talk about cost overages except for where you mentioned, okay, in the first few years, perhaps they might help us cover and we might codify that in the agreement, we might not. So the MVRTA, I'm just going to leave that as number 1. Number 2 is scale, design, and traffic, I guess would be numbers 2 and 3. I think traffic's been talked about a lot, but we haven't seen a traffic study at all. And so we're kind of in this chicken or the egg problem, in my opinion. Sort of saying, well, we need to design it first, and then we can get into some of these details. But I think, at least I can only speak for myself, I'm looking at this design money as a huge step forward in this project. And we could potentially be bonding out $630,000, and then we might not be happy with what we get. We might not be happy with what it looks like. And so traffic and scale and design, just to echo, I think Councilor Junta mentioned, I think the abutters are probably owed some pictures of what this thing might look like, or some kind of something. I mean, I'm not in this field, so I can't speak, but something that just shows, here's what the massing would look like coming down Merrimack, coming down Titcomb. I don't think that's too difficult to come up with, I think. So traffic scale design. Number 4 would be the NRA letter for Chairman Solemni. You mentioned a letter you might like to renegotiate the contracts. What does that mean? What is there, what do you want to renegotiate? So not a question to answer now, but just to explain what my thought process is. The next one, and I'm trying to go as fast as I can, because I appreciate the need to try and get public comment. I think the cost of design should come down since the garage has come down in size. So if it costs $630,000 to design a $16 million, bigger garage, my experience has been that the architectural costs usually track with the cost of the project. So if it's a smaller garage, why can't we spend less? And I'm open personally to the idea of spending much less to get those initial designs, if that's what we need to spend, to give a butter something to look at, to give the city something to consider. If we need to spend $100,000 to put some time into it, then maybe that's what we need to do. And I'm not sure there's enough time to do that before March, but I'm working within the framework that I have. So that, and then the last one is, at some point we probably on the weekend.
Second, in your analysis, were you looking at did you look at extending the time periods that we charge for parking in Green Street lots, or the other parking spaces in the city? Green Street, or the library, the waterfront? Did it? So if we stayed with the time period up to 6 o'clock instead of extending it. Yeah. Okay. That's it.
Wow. Councilor Vogel, cool. Oh, wait a minute, it's 8:59.
Yeah. Thank you.
30 seconds.
Exactly. Follow up to a number of questions that have come down the line. One, the renderings of the views. In particular, the view looking out the mouth of the river from the corner of Pleasant and Market Street. And I mentioned some time ago to have the designers take a look at putting the elevator away from that corner. I mean, if you could put the elevator in any worse space, I don't know where it would be. But that's, giving away, we've already decided that we're not going to take land, and I'm sure the abutters greatly appreciate that. But let's not take view. I mean, if we get an opportunity to not take the view, let's at least move the shaft up the street somewhere. I mean, get it out of that corner. And I know that there's this argument about getting people onto that so they can get down to the beach quicker and all that stuff. They're going to walk whichever way they're going to walk to get down to the water. They're going to walk whichever way they want to walk. So I say get the elevator out of that corner. It doesn't make any sense at all. And if we're going to answer to the abutters. Sure.
So again, just looking at it from a design point of view, urban design perspective, I recognize that if the possibility of a garage that has a stairwell at that corner and an elevator shaft at that corner, which is only one spot back in the building, it may potentially, we have to get the renderings from designers, but may have some impact on the view to the mouth of the river from 1 or 2 properties that have these rooftop decks, from that kind of angle. I would have to say, again, as planning director, this is my own professional opinion, but if we're going to locate the stairwell, I think we want to do it in the most functional location where people are going to be using it, and not necessarily pick the location based on only one view shed that might be impacted, because, as you know, buildings in downtown, new development, for instance, could have done a building that would have been higher in scale, this building would have reduced to 2 floors, and it would have blocked that view or changed that view, immensely. I think for us to relocate the stairwell somewhere else, we can certainly do it, but I think then we'd have a lot of people who are going to use the garage over a period of 50 years or more and say, why would we put the stairwell over here when everybody's trying to go that direction? So we want to make sure that I think on a balance we're having the right location. We're going to do it, but it may cause other problems.
Well, I'd like to understand that there's a possibility, and I think that it's a gross assumption to assume that everybody wants to go out that corner. I don't know, we don't know that everybody wants to go out that corner. If they came out of the middle of Titcomb Street between Titcomb and Pleasant, what difference? So I think that's just an assumption. I think I'd like to look at it, and I'd like to see. Again, I'm talking on behalf of the abutters. Yeah. We've talked grossly on behalf of the abutters, considering the fact that we're no longer taking that property and we're adjusting the shape. And I'm pleased that we did. So let's go one step further if we can. I mean, that's right out that corner.
We can ask the designers to show what that would look like, and then we'll have to have some discussion about what actually.
That would be great.
Yeah.
In terms of the cost of the property, originally it was 2.3 million was the number we talked about for the whole property. Is that accurate? And now we're down to about 2 million, considering that they're going to keep a little bit of the fitness factory. So the question that I have, so that doesn't seem like a whole lot of difference to me. The question that I had is, we're not necessarily negotiating with the development. We're just trying to make an easier path to buy it from them as opposed to taking it by eminent domain. I mean, we can take the property, get it appraised, and we just take it, right? I mean, is there much? Tell me the difference. Tell me why we're not just taking it, why we're doing it the other way. It's just an easier way of doing it.
If it's a friendly purchase or a friendly taking, what do you want to call it?
Based on the size that
Either way.
the RTA did, so it's not that we're just taking them for nothing.
Yeah, I'm just, that was just a question. I'm not challenging it. I'm just wondering why.
It's more of a procedural thing. It becomes easier with timeline paperwork.
Understood. Thank you. The cost of the property, the property bonding. Okay. On this analysis that you've done, you have the different schemes. I've said all along that I'm in favor of the largest parking garage that we can afford with the least impact on the abutters. I take a look at, we're talking about 90 spaces that New Development is going to lease, and we're talking about all these other people going to be leasing it, the 244. Next thing we know, we're going to be down to 50 places for, people driving in. To take the whole thing, for an extra, $2.2 million in construction costs and so on and so forth, or in bonding costs or whatever, to get 297 or another 70 spaces. I mean, we only have one chance to do this right. It seems awkward to me to be doing it, trying to, a penny saved is not necessarily a penny earned in this case. We're going to be, tearing up that property we're going to be building. Why not just build the biggest one we can do? And according to the, conservative projections of money, we can afford it. It doesn't necessarily, and originally we weren't, help me out, we weren't necessarily talking about parking revenues covering the cost of this. There was some bonding outside of parking revenues, was there not, originally?
Originally, we had always talked with the RTA about keeping it, within the $5 million that we could bond. And then as the garage numbers really started to come in, as we were looking at, 440, 500 spaces in height, that's, and then the facade, and then the council saying that they did not want to trade land for spaces. We added $2 million for the land, we added 1.5 to do the facade, and that's when we got up to 16 million, and I said, stop.
Right, I understand, but...
So,
yeah.
yes, but I am not willing to spend more than $5 million and use additional bond. We have so many other needs in the city. We have so many needs. We have been in a situation where we have defrayed, maintenance, capital costs, equipment needs. You see the capital plan. It's enormous
Sure.
in terms of needs. And so we can't have, two roofs on the high school building. We have security, and I could go on and on about other needs. And I just do not want to use all our bonding capacity on this.
With all due respect, and neither do I, but with all due respect, we've had this conversation, it seems to me, and it seemed that even at the joint meeting, the school committee meeting where Ethan presented the projections over the years and the cost of our bonding going down, there was a significant decrease in our bonding obligations, and I thought that was tied into what we could afford. I mean, I'm not going to have this argument, and I'm not arguing, I'm just saying that if we're going to do this, and, these are Councilman Eigenman's words, we only have one shot at doing it real right. And I would, just for the record, I'd like the scheme A, and then just for the record also, it's kind of disappointing, and it's too bad we're up against the wall, and we've just dismissed this robotic parking effort out of hand. That was a fascinating effort, and I think that it would be cutting edge for this community to head down that road, and it's too bad that we're just right up against the wall with that, and we can't even consider it. I came out of that meeting going, wow, cool. Smaller space, less money, well, not less money per se, but smaller space, more spaces. I thought it would be cool. Those were my only comments.
I address that because again, was interested in learning about the robotic garages, but why haven't they taken off in our country if they're so wonderful? Why haven't they, I met with a resident who works for Avalon, who said hundreds of garages across the country were going to check in on prices for him. And he just started laughing when I showed him the robotics. And basically said, after you get through your first year of warranty and all the moving parts associated with these robotic garages and the maintenance and the cost, so they are just unknown. And that's why even the latest one that we built in Miami, people are using Uber to get to work because it takes too long to get their car out of the garage. So I think that there is a market for this somewhere down the road with this. I don't want to be a test case anymore. We've done too much, with, let's call it an airbag system on the line. I would like to do something that has a proven track record.
I use the word guinea pig in the meeting. I understand. Thank you.
Councilor Cronin has one very brief question, and then I'll open it to the public.
Andy, in your, on page 9 in your report, it says that we're going to be getting the 30% traffic study by the end of March. But I just want to get that balanced with, that sounds so it's going to be after our vote, and I'd like at least a preliminary traffic.
Sure, we'll ask them to provide you in the next couple of weeks where they've come so far in the traffic study. They did hold off on full finalizing that because they weren't sure what the study was going to hold a bit, as Mayor mentioned. When we weren't figuring out exactly how big the facility was going to be and where the entrances and exits were going to be. So
we decided the orientation.
Right. At that time, we were still debating the orientation of the building, so if we are back and there's some sort of consensus here as to where the entrances and exits will be from the building, which is what you can kind of see. I recommend that option 1A, but that would give us definitive locations for the doors as people are coming in and out. That gives the traffic consultants the ability to look at the immediate intersection and determine how much queuing space there is, for instance. So with that information, if there is consensus from the council, we can make sure that the design team provides that information in the next couple of weeks.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah. So, and then that would be put in a final document sent to the federal government.
I just wanted to also mention that we have an abutters meeting Tuesday night at 7 to be here, and there will be an opportunity for the public to speak to them.
And Budget and Finance and the Committee of the Whole will be meeting again. It's just, it's 9 o'clock now. If anyone would like to make any brief comments, Mr. Salami.
I just want to clarify our letter there. First, Council, your question. Our agreement with the city expired January last year. We've actually worked on extension on it. Since then, we've wanted to see a fee increase of $1, and also in the market side, also interested in expanding the time on the lot, so we're charging as well. But because this process has been years, it's been delayed and delayed. So we have our current extension was expired in April, and we're very much like negotiating the agreement now. Per my letter there, and just again wanted to state, that's consistent with what the NRA has wanted to do. We wanted to parking off the lot. We potentially, or we have a personal feeling, but the board itself is somewhat agnostic as to where to go. I think trying to force that feeling is where it could go. The financials are one area that we have questions about. That letter is the extent of our involvement in this process. I was happy to hear Ethan say that the numbers that are in this report don't include figures from our spaces on the NRA lot, and then there's some questions in the future, but we still need to delve into these numbers as well. So we may have some questions on that. I just want the council to know that our involvement is just like that letter, and we're interested to see if this can move forward.
Roberta Lennis on 104 Pleasant Street. I haven't heard once about anything about emissions and benzene from a garage, and it hasn't been addressed yet. I'm wondering when a study is going to be done about that kind of impact to humans that live within 20 feet of a garage.
I think that the issue was brought up during the initial design meeting, and Wes from Desmond Associates, who is the engineering design team, had talked about building garages all across the country, and that he has to build to standards, and that there are studies that support that.
maybe the designs that we use on, but we certainly can have further conversation about that. I can discuss that next week. I've got lots of information.
Yes, I just have one comment.
Name, address.
It's 77 Arlington Street. The city has existing parking lots for revenue. My assumption is that the parking garage, bonds, and maintenance operating revenue will be paid for by the parking spaces in that garage. We're not talking about the $1 money somehow.
Yeah.
That would mean a loss of existing revenue.
Yes.
Well, we're also increasing some of the rates. We're increasing rates to deal with the surface parking maintenance, but also the garage, which we can deal with that
I'm just saying, there's money coming in from those existing parking lots. That's been used by the cities, revenue base, that is lost.
It all goes up.
That's why the revenue projections and the cost projections are so critical.
The other question I have is on the cost side. If it's $2 million in assessed value of the property, we're going to lose what, $25,000 a year in revenue plus the opportunity cost of other, maybe a low carbon development on that property in the future. It seems like that should be projected into cost of this facility. You are losing something versus, as Councilor Iverman proposed, using the Green Street laws, which is not taxable property right now. So you're taking away potentially very valuable taxable property, because you can't tax it because the government owns it. That's the feedback I think about.
Yeah. Name, address, please.
John Beal, Merrimack, 263. You graph shows a very positive revenue slope. And typically businesses have good years and bad years.
I'm sorry, I can't. Can you speak up a little, please?
Yeah, sure. John Beal, Merrimack Street.
Thank you.
Okay. Typically, your graph shows a real positive slope up. And typically, businesses have good years and bad years that I've seen. And so we may have the snow beginning thing, and so somebody couldn't hear me.
I was thinking about saying still beginning. That last year. We'll do that this year.
So anyway, the reality is that is there contingent liability for the taxpayers if there's a loss from one of those years?
Jane. Name, address.
I don't know if I should say my last name, Jane Snow. Façade Street, Newburyport. Can you tell me how much that land is assessed for currently, that we're going to pay $2.1 million for?
Yeah, I don't know the assessment off the top of my head. We go by the appraisal. I know we're looking for the assessment. We don't go by the assessment, we go by the appraisal based on the current market conditions. So in this case, it's just over $2 million. But I understand what you're saying. I think you're asking about what it's.
It's assessed
I
at
think what it
1.4.
said, number one, we're going to pay a premium price for a piece of land. We'll no longer be able to tax it. If somebody else bought it, they would pay taxes on it. Green Street is screaming much nicer to me. And being old and gray as I am, I did some walking this weekend of all the blocks because I was curious how many parking spaces we had. And I think you're going to find that Titcomb Street is going to be too far for people to want to go downtown from. If you go down Christmas shopping, as women do, and you're laden with that, things, you're not going to want to walk all the way back up to Titcomb Street. And if the lots are anything like what I saw on Sunday when I went to visit and they weren't plowed, people aren't going to want to do that. So I think I know time is of the essence, but I think you're letting a deadline rule what you're doing, I think we need to think carefully of what we're doing. We would save $2 million by not purchasing that land to move it to Green Street. There's a start right here, even if we didn't get the grant. We're up $2 million and we can't gain the revenue from that particular lot. So I really would encourage the council to rethink this. I know it's a good thing, the garage and stuff, but I think we're selling ourselves short. So please think carefully.
All right. As brief as I can.
Name?
First of all,
Name, address, please.
Andrew Morris, 23 Cherry Street.
Thank you.
You guys need microphones. Honestly, you need microphones. I'm having a hard time hearing. I'm sure that people are too. It's late. I don't hear that loud. I don't hear it. You need mics. Okay. Okay. The NRA was talking about the removal of 100 to 150 spaces off the waterfront, which I'm assuming is going to cause some loss of revenue for the city. I did not see that anywhere in your profit projection, your projection of profits. So I'll just make that point. I think that should be included in your profit and loss. Okay, that's not in there. Another one thing. One thing I wanted to say is some questions I had. Are we doing this for the right reasons? First of all, specifically for the council. What is the best thing for Newburyport? Is this garage truly necessary? And if so, what is the best location? I want you to take the deadline, the amount of money that we're going to potentially lose out of the equation for a minute. Okay, because I think that's skewing our thinking. I think we need to think in terms of what's best for the city. And where would we put it if we do want to do a garage? Where would we put it? What's best for the city? Not the money we're going to put. That's not important. And as Jane pointed out, if we put it in the right location, we are gaining money right there. I don't know. I walk around the city a lot, and I see a lot of open spaces. I don't know if these studies that have been done have actually walked around the city to get a team of people. I'm sure some residents participate in this. Study all the different lots at all the different times of the year and different times of day, different times of the week, and see how much we really need this and how much is really going to be used. That's really critical. I haven't heard anything about that. I guess I'm in favor of the Green Street lot. If you know, I agree with Jane. The other lot is too far away. I'm trying to think of that. So many things, and I'll pick that back a little bit. If you had more time, I would do a tweet survey, of the residents of the city. Don't know if we're going to do this deadline thing if you have time. I'd like to know. This is for the people of the city, correct? I'd like to know if the city thing. And I want a true cross-section of the people of the city. But again, that's a good time. Oh, the long-term parkers. That takes away, I'm assuming, from the amount of parking spaces that are open to tourists, which I'm assuming that this is being built for. So that's something that's, you got to think that through, because you take away too many spaces. It's the same thing in the spaces on the roof. You're taking away spaces there, and you're adding spaces here. Well, the net gain is greater, including the cost of the space goes up. So I think that's about all I have to say. Thank you.
Mr. Beal's question.
We will meet again, so I'll recognize two short comments.
My question was answered.
Here's question.
I think what we're doing is noting questions. I mean, and we'll get to it in the next meeting. I mean, we've had a lot of questions on the revenue and place. Yes, Mary.
For the granite Unitarian Church was removed hydraulic. There were no exceptions.
Okay, we don't
Well,
get
let
it.
that go, but I want to correct that hydraulic because of the fragility structure. I have a question. I have never been given a definition of what intermodal means. I have been assumed that it means a bus hub. I don't know if I'm right. I mean, this term has been around and around. What does it mean? Intermodal.
First station.
What does it mean?
It's a space where there's a small terminal office there where folks can get their tickets and get onto the buses, the MVRTA buses specifically, which is why there'll be bus stops right on Merrimack, the way the design is partly schematically done. It'll have it'll have parking room for bicycles on the first floor as well, a small space designated for bicycles. So it's intended to be a accommodation facility that allows people to come from different modes of transportation. That's why it's intermodal. Switch to another mode.
Walking to bus, bicycle to bus, automobile to bus.
And I don't think I'm really citizen because
Sure. Thank you.
Christopher,
Last question. Last question.
the only other thing I want to bring up is, I haven't heard anybody talk about, if we use Green Street, and we use more of the lot, we only went up 2 floors. I'm sure we dropped the cost a couple $1 million. That's it.
We will put up on the city webpage when we are going to meet again. Budget and Finance will meet with committee of the whole soon. Has to be soon. I'm looking at next week. It won't be Thursday because we have council meeting. It won't be Monday.
It won't be Tuesday because
It won't be Tuesday.